Today we're going to take a look at how the old masters and living masters of today paint the highlights in the eyes. Let's start with William Adolphe Bouguereau's portrait of Gabrielle Cotte. Notice how these highlights are very subtly painted and close to the lash line, with the highlight in the left eye being painted a little bit smaller to give the illusion that it's further away and more in the shadow. Notice Lady with Glove. No highlights painted in the eyes whatsoever. I think it leaves you with a feeling of mystery. Like the portrait of Gabrielle Cotte, these highlights are painted very small and close to the lash line. And notice that they are in the same angle, both of the highlights. That's a must. In putting the highlights in the eyes, they must be on the same line of angle. If you compare the girl with pomegranate to Gabrielle, you can see the highlight on the girl is on the left side of the pupil because the light source is on the left side of the face, and the highlight on Gabrielle is on the right side, hence the movement of the highlight to the right side of the pupil. Bouguereau paints the prayer with hardly any highlight at all. Notice just a faint highlight in the left eye, which is the side where the light is coming into the face, and the right eye is in the shadow. Now let's take a look at living master Cesar Santos. This is the fixed and the mobile. Notice the light source coming from above on the right. It's pushing the highlight lower on the eye, kind of to the bottom of the pupil. Notice here in Santos's The Art Collector, the light source is in front of the face and a little bit to the upper left. So the highlight has been moved to the left side, but up close to the lash line, similar to what we saw with Bouguereau. So Cesar Santos painted out of the square with no highlights at all, and we saw that with Bouguereau as well. But when Bouguereau did it, the images were more in shadow. Here, the images seem to be somewhat well lit, yet no highlight in the eye. How interesting. Santos's Savior is dark and moody with only one highlight, and it's painted in the eye that's on the side where the light's coming into the face. So it seems if you want to have a more moody, mysterious look, use less highlights. Are you picking up on that trend that the highlight is on the same side as the light? The same side of the pupil, that is. So this master from the past, John Singer Sargent, has a more painterly brushwork style than did Bouguereau, yet his highlights in the eyes seem to be painted somewhat similar with a very light touch and close to the upper lash line. Now with Sargent's Mrs. Charles E. Inches, the highlight and the edges of the iris are very soft, and you can see the highlight in that right eye kind of streaks into the white of the eye. Also, take note of the two highlights at the bottom of the iris. Sargent's Countess Castillo is a darker painting with the highlights barely painted in. You can see that the light source is coming from the right since the highlight is on the right side of the pupil. Now with Sargent's self-portrait, the eye on the left has light spilling over to the top of it, and the highlight is painted larger and a little brighter, even though it's not on the light side of the face, as is the right eye. Okay, we have another living master and my mentor, Tina Garrett. There are highlights in both eyes. They're painted in a dark value and very small. There's actually more emphasis put on the highlight in the white of the eye on the right eye next to the iris, and the lower upper lash line of the left eye on the side of the face where the light's coming in. In Garrett's Mint Julep, the highlight is treated a lot like the masters did by placing it on the right side of the pupil where the light side is close to the upper lash line, but hers are painted bigger. And notice the bright highlight on the far eye that's painted where the light's just spilling over the nose slightly reminds me of the Sargent self-portrait that we saw. In Garrett's City Blues, there appears to be a more painterly approach, much like John Singer Sargent, with the light source being slightly in front of the subject and high above the head. The highlights are close to the upper lash line, but look how she streaked across like Sargent did in his painting. The highlight is just pulled right into the white of the eye on the right side. Now I want to show you how I handle the highlights in the painting of my eyes, and how I've tried to push them creatively. This highlight was located on the right side of the iris towards the bottom lash line. So when I painted it in, I took a painterly approach, much like Sargent, and really did some exciting brushwork there. Here the highlight's placed low on the iris and put it a little bit larger than you usually see highlights. This is indicating that the light source is low to the face. Next, I'll show you a time lapse of my selective start process in painting this eye with that beautiful wide low highlight. So as we saw with the master paintings, usually the highlight is painted higher up towards the upper lash line. That's because most of the time when people were sitting for portraits, they had one light source and it was placed to the side slightly and above the head. So as things moved along and modern artists started mixing up the position of where the light source is hitting the face, then you started to see the highlight in the eyes move around somewhat. But the main thing that I've learned today and that I want you to take away with is the highlight in the eye is based on where the light source is coming from. And if you want to stay true and believable to the light source, then you have to pay attention to where you place your highlight in the eye to do that. And the other thing is the highlights are always placed in the same angle. They're painted on a straight line. The other thing that I took away from today is it's okay to just leave the highlight out altogether. Then you might have a bit more of a mysterious look in the eyes. And even looking at the amazing living masters of today, Cesar, Santos, and Tina Garrett, and comparing them to the old masters William Adolphe Bouguereau and John Singer Sargent, they both handled the highlights in the eyes very similar to the old master style. But as you know, I tend to like to break the rules. But when you're doing so, just make sure that it's still conveying the message that you want to send with your portrait. And the message that you're sending is definitely going to be coming from the eyes. So for instance, if you put one highlight up high towards the upper lash line and perhaps one highlight in the other eye lower, more close to the lower lash line, it would convey the message that your sitter probably is a little bit crazy in the head. And that only works if that's the intent you had in mind. So I would recommend that you experiment and try placing the highlights in different ways through your portrait paintings and see how you can push the boundaries and maybe come up with new ways to do it. If you want to see this eye tutorial and another in real time and paint along with me, I have a free How to Paint Eyes tutorial for you. I'll leave the link in the description and you can go and grab your free How to Paint Eyes tutorial. So I hope you guys enjoyed this comparative discussion on painting the highlights in the eyes. I know I did, and I'm excited to try out some new highlight techniques in my up-and-coming portraits. Thanks for watching, and I hope I've inspired you to go paint something amazing. Now, let's paint.